And I've got set so there won't be any participation online. Nobody's chimed in anyhow, which is good. So this is just a technical review committee meeting for 1624,
1640 East Shore
Drive. And I'll just start with, I've got a picture, a drone picture. It's kind of paused right now, but from the lake, just to get an idea of the about approximately 30-foot drop from the high point of the property down to the lake. I can play a little bit more of that for you, just so you can kind of see what it's like.
The drop off, we have the drone video because the drop off.
Could you just, for the record, just state your name and address?
Hello, I'm Doug Berkey. I'm with RWA Architects. I'm the architect on the project. My address is 2771 Observatory Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45208. Do we need to introduce all three of us, or do you want me to?
Only if they're going to speak.
If they're going to speak, okay. We're introducing a project here that we've been working on since October of 2022. So this has been 2.5 years in the making. We've done a lot of our homework. We've been blessed with owners, Elizabeth and J.A. Lacey, who own the house at the existing house right there in the foreground of 1630, and they purchased the lot at 1640 as well, but they've owned that house since the early 1980s, so they've been in Culver here for 40 years. As a family house, and as their family has grown and kind of using this, they bought the lot to the south with the intention of having 2 family houses. And so that's what they've been designing here. They've spent a lot of time because they really do want to make sure that they get the project right. So like I said, we've been working on this project since October of 22 with lots of planning. It's and Steve started to allude to, it's a very unique site. You don't have this too often on a lakeside, and certainly not here at Maxinkuckee, that there's 30 feet of drop off, and it's not like a 30-foot slope across the site. This is a very flat lot, and then it drops. And as you can see on our existing house there's 2 sets of stairs, and they go through these other houses here, have these existing houses, lower portions of houses down closer to the lake level, and then the main parts of the house up at the higher. So that topography has provided us a very unique challenge here. And so we've done a lot of study with how that's going to be. We originally met to talk about kind of the zoning aspect of this. It's a big, really critical factor with this new site. So we had our first zoning review meeting back in February of 2023 with Jenny Monroe, Steve's predecessor, and kind of just reviewed what our interpretations of the setbacks were. She wrote an acknowledgement email to us back in February, and just to make sure that she felt that we were conforming to our setbacks. After she left back in May of 23, I did a similar follow-up when we were up here for other reasons with Steve on site in May of 23, just to make sure that we were kind of keeping that dialogue open to make sure that everybody was in agreement before we got too far along. So we tried to be as careful as possible as we could with the layout of the house on the site, making sure that we're making all of our interpretations. We've learned a lot of things along the way with it, but this is our 4th project in Culver, so we're pretty familiar with the L1 district. Some other things here then, as we go here, we know how Culver is really, really protective of the water quality and the runoff. We engaged with a very experienced and well-respected builder in the area, Milestone Construction. So we're going to have supervision on site throughout the duration of the project to ensure that we maintain silt control, erosion control. You can see in our site plans that we've included the details to make sure that we are maintaining erosion control, because we're just, the unique challenge of the site, that steep hillside, any heavy rain during disturbed soil is going to cause a lot of runoff. So we've got a lot of planning in there for that. What our drawings show is 42% lot coverage. So we're 8%, approximately 8% below the 50% allowable. We've got some play there. Steve pointed out something to us this morning here about the semi-permeable pavers that we have called out on the rear of the site at our what we're calling our fund level, our first basement. And the fact that they're semi-permeable, the interpretation is they should be counted as impermeable, or we are counting them as impermeable now. So our numbers did change here, and so we are adding that square footage back in. We are actually now going to be at 43.5%. So we're still below our 50% threshold. All the other site stuff, even though they are semi-permeable, we counted the front walk as 100% impermeable, just to make sure that we're being overly conservative on our calculations. So we do have that there. Another thing to note then is our main ridge line. We established our grade per.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Because you're like
answering your question in advance.
You answered so much before we can even go look at the pictures of it.
So
I'm going to slow you down.
That's okay. That's my last talking point was height and how we.
Okay,
how we
well go ahead with the height then, and then I'll go back to the pictures.
We have our ridges set at 32 feet, and that is 32 feet from our first floor line, which actually makes it 31 feet from the high point on site. So we actually, and this is kind of intentionally done, and I'm going to ask Steve to kind of go to the 3D rendering here in a second. Because it's such a big house, I mean, there's no way around saying this is a big house. We're doing our best to try to make it not appear massive. And so we brought the height of this thing down, didn't push the max that we could have pushed for height allowances. We wanted to bring it down so that the scale mainly from the lake elevation is not huge. But we have about 4 feet of play from our ridge point up to our allowable building height. But then the more important thing, and this is where I'll stop, Steve, is if you can pull up the 3D image that you guys have on the paper in front of you, you can see on the lake elevation, we've intentionally kind of stepped that elevation back. We've set this up with 3 main gables to break the scale down with a little kind of transparent connector, a lot of glass in the connector. And we've stepped the second floor back and the first floor back, and to intentionally try to make this thing not this 4-story massive house facing lake. We want this thing intentionally work on this thing to fit into the scale of the house to the south and the 3 houses to the north, trying our best to make a big house not feel massive. That's where I'll stop right here and let's start answering whatever questions you guys might have.
Number one, I love the architecture.
Thank you.
I love that look of stepping it back. It's too many times it seems like they're imposing on the lake, and this doesn't have that feel. My question would be this: in order to prevent that large scale height, you've come down you've changed grade, and I know you've done your due diligence where the lake line is flood wise, but what's the elevation point at lake, and what's the elevation on that very
the lowest level floor line, I believe, is 8 feet above water line.
Okay. Yeah.
Existing water or the high level?
High water mark.
Yeah, that's what.
How is grade established for height?
So we go to the site plan. You take the overall developed area and make it into a rectangle. So all the ins and outs. So at the very front of the overhang at the garage to the very back of the screen porches and width to width, you take the whole thing. So it actually goes over the setbacks in certain areas. Once you square it out, the house doesn't go over the setbacks. And you draw an X, that gives you a middle point right there. At that point right there, that is where grade, the natural grade is called 0.
And that's taken pre-construction.
Pre-construction.
That's right.
As of today.
Yeah.
So that's basically an average high and low.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
That
simplifies it.
Yeah, simplifies it. So that gave us a high, we can look on the site plan. I believe it's 763.5.
I thought that's the way we were doing it, but I wanted
so that's what we do.
Yep.
That's what we did. The way we've done it on all 4 projects we've worked on in Culver.
What is the setbacks, the side yard setbacks?
That's in these drawings here.
It's in the drawings. So it matches, I believe it's 10 feet on the south side am I right? 10 feet on the south side right here. It actually, you mind if I stand up here, guys?
Not bad.
It actually changes up on the north part there. You can see that we had to increase it to 13 feet on the side, on the north side of the property. And that is in the zoning code. There is a certain width of lot. You see it? Okay. There is a certain width of lot, and because of this, the shape of our lot, it comes to a point and then comes back in. There you go. We get wider than 100 feet, I believe is the answer. And so it's every foot above 100 feet, you have to adjust in. So we had to bring our setback from 10 feet to 13 feet on the north property line.
North side.
And so you can see that right there.
Right there.
We have established a 13-foot instead of a 10-foot on the north side.
And that's from the gutter?
Those are from the furthest points, gutters and or eaves. So you can see here on this front one, I'm right behind you, Steve, but you know, we're using gutter. We're using point of a gutter, and the same other location where it comes into play is this other south corner here, and it is too gutter.
Thing looks like a hotel. It's so huge.
It doesn't look as bad as it
The,
is.
See, so those 2D drawings are very misleading. And it is a big house. I mean, I'm not trying to, I mean, it's 15,000 square foot house. It's a big house. But we've done our best with scaling it down, both from the front and the back, to try to keep it from looking like a huge house.
I think the way that you've tapered it on the lake side from the 17 side, 117, it really does. When you look at it, I agree, Chester, when you look at it from the roadside, it's a big house.
But that's divided between 4 stories.
It is, but I gotta tell you, when you were thoughtful in the architecture on the lakeside.
If you take it in context with the houses immediately to the north, you know, within a quarter mile, and immediately to the south within a quarter mile, we're no bigger than the other houses there. And then we've tried to bury as much of it as you can, as you say.
How much of a challenge are you gonna have blending back to your north and your south as you come off the lake? I noticed you've got that kind of terrace back up in there.
How much?
Because you're gonna be sitting, you say there's an existing 30-foot, right?
Yeah.
And to your north and your south, that ain't going away.
Nope. Yeah.
So you're blending all that back in on a slope.
Well, the vast majority of our house is on the flat part, and that gets back to the view easement.
Okay.
And the fact is that the existing house north-south, we can't go further out.
Exactly
So,
right. That's
yeah,
why I'm
we're
right.
not having it much, there's not much excavation for the bulk of this house.
Yeah.
All of the excavation that's really happening for
It's
this
cutting
is
that
kind of just
existing channel.
curving that little part back
Yeah.
in there at a casual grade so that we can get that lower
how
walkout.
many square feet in this one?
It's 15,000 something.
It's over 4 stories.
Yeah.
So if you just call it 16, it's like a 4,000 square foot house.
It's, yeah, the footprint, including the garage, the footprint is a little under 5,000 square feet.
What's this going to be used for? You say a family dwelling?
This is Miss Lacey's,
Yeah.
Mrs. Lacey's house that she's gonna be using with her husband and her 4 kids and their families.
And there again, you're looking at a 2-story house from the road.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
mean, in essence, right? And so it's deceptive in the way that you design it. And line of sight's probably gonna improve for after cutting that hill out a
Yeah.
little bit.
It's
It's thoughtful.
You mentioned erosion control during construction. What's your water, what are you gonna do with the water after construction?
So in our past experience, you know, we've had the silt filters for all the downspout lines coming to a box and filtering before any water kind of runs off to the water. In this project, and just kind of how this contour is working here.
which drawing is
Stay
that
right there.
in?
One more down. Because you're on the right page, just a little bit further down. This is our average grade diagram. So under our thing, we have 2 of these on the north and the south side of the site that we're going to filter in 2 locations.
Okay.
Just because of the way we're cutting the hillside back. So we've got the filter.
So you got a sump.
In essence,
It's a filtration that has to be cleaned out periodically.
I was gonna
That keeps the dirt and debris throughout the life of the house from going to the lake.
Right. So is that a single depository for all that?
There's two.
Two,
There's gonna be one on each side. It's just, it's a big lot and it's a
Yeah.
lot of hillside. So
That's-
we're not gonna try to do it in one. We're gonna separate that out.
That's clever. I like it.
So you have a silt barrier fence
And the hillside fence, the hillside cover.
and you have the hillside cover, which there's a drawing of that on here
It's
too.
right there because, and this gets back to that, while all that excavation is disturbed, that mud's gonna run off fast in a heavy rain. So we're covering that mud to keep it, the runoff as controlled as we can.
And then, and as this project is finished, what's the hillside gonna be?
Then it's ground cover, going back to something that will stabilize the soil. And the final landscape plans as far as the selections, those are still in process. But it is ground cover, some rooted material that will stabilize the site.
Just keep in mind, we've had,
Rental at all.
No, this is our personal home.
just to keep in mind, we've had one house within the last couple of years that had a landslide on because the hill wasn't properly stabilized. And they ended up having to put some 4 tiers of stabilizing in it.
We do have, we
To
do.
keep it from the house from falling into the lake.
It's funny that you mentioned this because we've had a geotechnical engineer consult on this. And we have a structural engineer consulting on this, and a little bit of the landslide discussion has happened within our structural calculations. And we're putting some measures in place there, but from the after construction, there are going to be some retaining boulders in there to help stabilize this around the ground cover in a few certain areas there. And that just
Good.
make it look a little bit more natural. as
What's
we
the
go down there.
setback off the lake?
Well, the setback off the lake is 30 feet, 35 feet established, but can we, on that site plan, I believe there's a dimension called out, right?
There is, so our setback is 25 feet from the high water
25.
mark. They're well beyond that.
Scroll down there just a quick second, if you don't mind, Steve. And then go to a little bit to the left. Our closest projection is 52 feet 8 off the lake. And that is at the very lowest level. So both of the neighboring houses can actually look over that due to this
That's what I
hillside.
was talking about, the line of sight.
And so like we've established it with almost 2 lines of sight. We have since it's, I mean, you got to look at what's immediately adjacent to you.
Yeah.
So we've held the whole upper part up to literal definition of the line of sight of the adjacent buildings. The lower part goes out to what's on the lower part, north and south.
Mhm.
So that the line of sight, we're not blocking anybody.
Yeah.
But the closest projection is 52 feet 8.
So when you talk line of sight, as long as we're there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything in your drawings that shows the neighboring houses and how that's established?
It's on the site plan right here. If you zoom out just a quick second.
Because I don't, with the neighboring houses,
Yep. This is the neighboring house to the south. This is the neighboring house to the south, and that is the corner of the
Okay.
house. So that is establishing
so,
our line of sight.
so the line of sight is based on any elevated porches, and both neighbors have elevated porches on their houses.
Mhm.
So it can't be from the house, it needs to be from elevated
All right,
porches.
well, then our line of sight should come out to here and we're pulled further
But
back.
it looks like,
from that.
but it doesn't look like your line of sight already looks like it's established from the elevated porch, not from the house. Is this the porch
That's
there?
the porch.
Run that dash over there, Steve, would scroll up.
So again, this is the elevated porch to the north. Right there. And so we're using that as our furthest out point, and we're using the corner of the house.
So what I was
I-
seeing,
I could move it out. If I use the elevated porch to the south, I could move this whole house about 2 feet closer to the lake.
what I was seeing, and I was just looking on Beacon, which we know isn't all that accurate. As I was looking at this on Beacon
Mhm.
and doing a quick drawing of the 2 houses from their porches, it looked more like 60 feet from the high water mark,
Oh,
which is approximately here. If I use their contours,
Yeah, but I'm past that for our screen porches. If you want to talk about the 60 feet versus what I'm calling out as 52 feet 8,
Mhm.
then you need to measure this line right here. You need to measure to that line right there. Not here, but to there,
right to here.
because that is the extent of the existing construction on the north property. Go back to my site plan, or go back to that, do you have?
So I guess, can you explain that to me?
Okay,
Why you're saying this existing construction?
because that right there is at the lowest level closer to the lake,
Okay,
okay? But it is a built room, an occupiable, habitable room in the 1630 property. So it is a part of the house, and by code definition, it is part of that house there. So that's why we struck that line there to the same point that you have right here, which is the elevated porch.
so you're saying, cancel this for a second. Sorry, I have to move this over.
And I didn't count this, I didn't count that flare wall out there, I counted the vertical face of the wall.
So you're saying from all the way over here?
Not from right there, you can go back even, I'm going to,
Where are you going from?
do you mind if I touch your mouse here?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I used the vertical face of that wall right there to the same location that you have right there. And you have to edit, but when you measure that, you'll get a dimension of
Okay,
52 feet something, or rather. Go back to the drone video of the existing conditions, and I believe you'll think that I have interpreted this correctly of averaging the house appropriately. And again, with that stepped area, the part that's 52 feet back, 52 feet 8 back, is this much lower elevation. Everything back there is counted from the two houses.
So, yeah, your line of sights, you're in compliance with the line of sights with that on the back.
what is that building on this house?
That is the sub-basement of the 1630 property right now. It's a lake porch gathering room. You know, they have a bar down there. They have a bathroom down, like a lake bathroom down there. It's a gathering space for that house right there.
Okay,
So that's why just that lower portion comes out to that. And the two houses above, they can look right over that lowest level. We're not impeding.
is this
any-
part of a walkout where this,
Yeah,
from this house, that's part of a walkout
Yep.
is?
it's got a large, if you go back to that elevation, you'll see a big sliding door at the bottom.
Okay,
So that's why we did it. But we pulled the other portion of the house back, because if we would have put the whole house out there, we definitely,
Crowded.
the spirit of the code, right, is that we would be, we'd be blocking that south neighborhood for sure.
okay.
So you're more generous than they are. Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was hearing
I
too.
mean,
Well,
and getting to it,
well,
if I push it.
Kind of the other way, but
If I
Yeah.
push it further out there, it looks bigger. We don't want it to look that big.
Yeah,
This can be built on helical piles.
No, it's a spread footing all the way through. There was a conversation back and
and you're
forth, but
good down there?
we did.
Obviously, you brought in a gym.
We did test
Sorry.
borings in 4 different
Didn't mean
locations.
to be insulting there, but it's kind of surprising to me to hear that.
Well, I mean, we've got another project that we were in here, just a couple of months ago, Karen walked through
Yeah.
for the Skelton project, and it has a lot of helical piers because it's so close to the grade.
Mhm.
Nope, they gave us good bearing soil everywhere here, and it's hard to believe that an eighth of a mile away, it changed that much.
Well,
No,
it's
it's
Culver Lake.
It's all over the place.
it's Indiana.
That glacier stuff is just,
Northern Indiana.
it's crazy.
So our county is actually unique, and Marshall County is very unique in that the way the soil types change, even just in the United States, our soil types can change in such close proximity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It got crazy when the glacier came through here.
I don't know how familiar you are. I mean, I'm from Cincinnati. You know how familiar you are with Cincinnati.
A little bit.
This 30-foot drop off, it's nothing for us. As we've got
That's what I say.
the 7 hills down there. We get landslides all the time.
Even when
And
you
so
cross the river on the, yeah.
it's just, it's nutty down there. So we're used to working on
Hills,
hills.
Yeah.
So
It's a lot like Rome.
We're flat.
Cincinnati.
overall,
the
we're
rest-
flat.
see, now originally I'm from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
just cornfield flat. Like,
I've shot through 70 many a time through there. Yeah, coming back to it, I think, a couple things. Number one, you're obviously showing an intentional willingness to be in compliance with everything. And I think architecturally, you've come up with a clever solution. how to build a big house without the feel. At least I feel, I mean, it's obvious it's a big
Oh,
house,
yeah.
especially when you really factor in, but you know, you get the illusion, it looks bigger, wider on the
Paper.
roadside, but you kept it at 2 stories. It looks taller on the lakeside, but it feels widthwise, and that's just clever. The green grass too, and keeping your elevations, but yet increasing that green grass in front of that lake is, I think, so many people build right
Is this
up on the
something you
lake,
wanted to
right?
hand us?
And I feel like there's a nice yard here
My notes.
of green grass. I think it kind of just captures some of the natural beauty rather than imposing on the landscape.
Yeah.
You're honoring the landscape
Yeah.
of what you're doing here.
Yeah.
The roadside view, the pictures here, just if you haven't flipped through all the pictures.
Yeah.
Right, it's,
The way you use rock and stone too is really the mixed material.
Mhm.
It's clever too, because it gives a smaller feel with the glass too.
it does.
It does.
It's not gonna look at size.
You know.
That's the hope.
Well done. I think,
Intent.
I don't have any more questions.
Sound good.
Let's see. Okay, I do, think something for us to discuss here a little bit more too.
Yep.
Because Doug and I discussed before you got in here, talking a little bit about structure height. So, with all of it, and it gets back to I'm gonna get ahead of myself. Structure height, so we have a maximum of 35 feet. One of the chimneys is gonna go over that a little bit, 6 inches or so. But we don't know, looking at our ordinance this morning, and I was looking at the structure heights. Where do we measure our structure height from? Do we measure it from the peaks or do we measure it from the highest portion of the roof? Would that be a lightning rod?
Somewhere.
Would that be a chimney? What's that?
There was a cupola somewhere that counted. So I would put that in the same, it's just
Category.
me.
I thought it'd be like top of the chimney. So my understanding was the highest point on the structure, not necessarily the peak of
That's
the
how
roof,
it's
but
been
the
in the
highest point.
past, because we counted cupola.
Well, we-
Spikes and all that.
They came into conversation.
That's where I was at too.
The executive storage. The cupola, the little peaks that we were.
That's what we've been counting.
So, yeah, my experience, obviously it's your jurisdiction and you guys get to set it, but it just historically, I've worked all over the country. My experience in almost everywhere is that chimneys are basically an exception for both height and projection into the setbacks. And I know you guys don't have an exception into the setbacks. You're very strict on the setbacks, but height wise, chimneys are always an exception to height because of the code issues required with, they are required to be 2 feet higher than any structure within 10 feet of it. So every jurisdiction I've ever been to, cupolas, clear story windows, anything that's attached to it that doesn't have like a code issue to it, it definitely counts into just as any other roof would. Chimneys have always been the exception for all jurisdictions I work with because of the fact that there is a requirement to be 2 feet above any other measured
So fire code
structure.
supersedes.
It's yeah.
building code.
Now, that's, again, what I've seen outside of Culver. You may choose to just say differently, and then we'll have to adjust accordingly, but
Steve, how much do you want to factor in the fact that it's 6 inches and not 2 foot or a foot, or how weighty is that for you in your mind?
It's not weighty at all personally, but we don't have a definition for structure
Well,
height. We
that's
just say 35 feet is our structure height.
That's what I was gonna say. I just think this body is the one that can answer.
We
that.
can't answer that.
and if it comes to precedence, and if we did talk about this, and again, this is not legally binding in any way, I know. But the project we did north of there at, was it 988? And this was during Chuck DeWitt's time, not Steve's time. We used the peak of the roof, and our chimneys did encroach a couple of feet above that, and they said that was okay.
And I
If
explained,
precedent has anything to do with it, but
No, that-
I'm gonna be respectful,
I
not in
probably-
this case.
and I explained that,
New sheriff in town. I love it, but
Get it,
yeah,
get it, I'm just
and
gonna say.
I explained I'm playing a lot of Chuck's messages.
Yeah, we are.
Here you
Be polite and
Okay.
Chuck allowed a lot of
We are on
problems.
the record
It
here.
may-
It does not necessarily.
It's on the record that I
I'm not speaking that the results may not be different, but what I'm saying is the process will be getting there.
That's
So,
fine, that is fine.
and that's where I want to honor it. And if that's something that we need to visit, in Bob's point, this isn't something that we could rule on.
We can't.
Yeah. And so we need to pass it to the next
So,
appropriately and honorably, and hopefully we'll be able to.
so we can't rule on that, but for me, as far as this, I have no issues with any of those other things that we've discussed on this.
Right. And just for a point of clarity, Steve, what would be the next step in order to resolve a ruling on the chimney?
I just need to see what Doug wants to do moving forward.
Very good. Okay.
My answer would be this, is if we can say, hey, we're past TRC approval, we can adjust the chimney because there's not a code issue with the chimney on how the chimney is going to perform, where the top of the flue is.
Mhm.
We just had a decorative cover above the top of the flue.
So we might be able to.
I can do some alterations to that to make sure that we can get it below the 35
So
feet.
there you go.
And
That's
I
my
will,
math. That's my
if
math.
we get to the point of, hey, this is going to be a sticking point on our end, we will make sure it's not a sticking point. We will adjust
Yeah, I feel like
your
we can
requirements.
trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't got any issues.
No.
There's nothing everything's in compliance. There's nothing that we have to say. Anybody have any comments? I don't have any
No.
comments.
Motion to approve. I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. You got it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. It's easy
Okay.
peasy.
Meeting's adjourned
All right, stop the recording.
as soon as I can get to it.
All right.